there comes a moment that almost everyone experiences, but very few people ever notice it. One day, someone stops asking for your opinion, not because they forgot, but because they no longer believe your opinion matters. They still smile, they still greet you, they still act as if nothing has changed, but something has changed, something invisible. Respect has quietly left the room, and no one announces when it happens. The frightening part isn't that people disrespect you. The frightening part is that it rarely happens all at once. It happens little by little. A compromise here, a hesitation there, one unnecessary apology, one moment when you stayed silent because you were afraid of making someone uncomfortable. Until one day, people begin treating you exactly the way you taught them to. Most people believe respect is something other people give you. Marcus Aurelius believed something entirely different. He believed respect begins long before anyone else decides to offer it. It begins with the relationship you have with yourself. Think about that for a moment. Every time you ignore your own values to gain someone's approval, you send a message, not only to them, but also to yourself. I am willing to become less than who I really am, just to be accepted. And people can feel that, even if they never say a word. The strange thing about respect is that it works like a shadow. The harder you chase it, the faster it disappears. But when you stop chasing and begin building your character, it quietly starts following you. This is the lesson. Marcus Aurelius spent his entire life trying to understand not how to control other people, but how to become the kind of person who no longer needs their approval. Tonight, I want to ask you one question. When was the last time you changed who you were just to avoid someone else's judgment? Maybe you laughed at something that wasn't funny. Maybe you agreed with an opinion you didn't believe. Maybe you apologized for something that wasn't your fault, not because it was right, but because you were afraid of losing someone's acceptance. That is where respect begins to disappear. But here's what almost nobody realizes. The people who command the deepest respect are rarely the loudest. They don't argue to prove they're right. They don't explain every decision. They don't seek permission to live according to their values. Their power comes from somewhere else, somewhere far quieter. Marcus Aurelius once ruled the most powerful empire on earth, yet every night, before sleeping, he reminded himself of a truth that most of us spend our entire lives trying to escape. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Think carefully about those words. If your peace depends on someone else's respect, then they already control you, and anything that controls you can eventually destroy you. So perhaps the real question isn't, why do people secretly disrespect me? Perhaps the better question is this: what part of me have I abandoned that allowed it to happen? because the answer may change everything. Tonight, we're going to uncover 7 uncomfortable truths, not about other people, about ourselves. And the first one is also the most common. Most people never even realize they're doing it. There is a quiet habit, so common, that most people mistake it for kindness. It doesn't begin with weakness. It begins with a simple desire to be liked, to belong, to avoid conflict. At first, it feels harmless. You laugh, even when nothing is funny. You agree, even when your heart says otherwise. You apologize for things that were never your fault. One compromise doesn't seem important, neither does the next, or the one after that, until one day, you wake up and realize you've become a stranger to yourself. The strange thing about approval is that it never satisfies. The more you receive, the more you need. It's like drinking seawater. For a moment, it feels like relief, but every sip only makes you thirstier. Many people spend years trying to earn everyone's acceptance, yet somehow they feel more anxious than ever before because they are no longer asking, what is right? They are asking, what will people think? And those are 2 very different questions. Imagine a young oak tree growing in an open field. Every day, the wind pushes it from a different direction. If the tree tries to follow every gust, it never grows straight. It bends again and again until it no longer remembers its original shape. People are no different. Every opinion you chase pulls you a little farther from who you really are. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the opinion of others belongs to them, not to you. Think about that for a moment. How much of your day is controlled by thoughts that don't even belong to you? Someone criticizes you, and suddenly, your peace disappears. Someone ignores your message, and your confidence begins to fade. Someone disagrees with you, and you start questioning your own judgment. Without realizing it, you've handed over the keys to your emotional life. People often believe confidence comes from being admired. The Stoics saw something different. Confidence grows when your actions are guided by your principles instead of applause. That kind of confidence is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't compete. It doesn't need to win every conversation because it already knows who it is. Think about the people you've respected throughout your life. Were they desperate to impress everyone, or did they possess a certain calmness that couldn't be shaken by approval or criticism? Real strength rarely asks to be noticed. It simply exists, and over time, people notice it on their own. There is another danger hidden inside the need for approval. Every time you ignore your own values to satisfy someone else, your mind remembers, not consciously, but quietly. It begins to whisper, "You cannot trust yourself." That whisper becomes doubt. Doubt becomes hesitation. Hesitation becomes fear. And fear changes the way you walk, the way you speak, the way you look people in the eyes. Long before others lose respect for you, you have already begun losing respect for yourself. Perhaps this is why Marcus Aurelius returned to the same reminder again and again throughout his journal. Do not become the kind of person who abandons reason simply to please the crowd, because crowds change every day. Character doesn't. So tonight, ask yourself a question that may be uncomfortable. If everyone around you disagreed, would you still choose the same path, or would you quietly become someone else? Your answer reveals more about your character than anything you could ever say. But approval is only the beginning. There is another habit, even more dangerous. Most people believe it makes them appear honest. In reality, it slowly teaches others that their words carry no weight. It is the habit of explaining yourself to everyone. And once you understand why we do it, you'll never look at another argument the same way again. There is something almost everyone does. The moment they feel misunderstood, they begin to explain. At first, it seems reasonable. After all, who doesn't want to be understood? So you explain why you made that decision, why you said those words, why you couldn't say yes, why you chose to walk away. And when they still don't understand, you explain again, longer, louder, with more details, believing that the next sentence will finally change their mind. But something strange begins to happen. The more you explain, the less convincing you become, not because your reasons are weak, but because your need to be understood becomes stronger than your confidence in your own choices. Imagine holding a priceless diamond in your hand. Would you chase strangers down the street, begging them to believe it was valuable? Of course not. Its value doesn't depend on their opinion. It exists, whether they recognize it or not. Your principles should be treated the same way. Marcus Aurelius understood that not every mind is open. Some people don't misunderstand you because you explained badly. They misunderstand you because they have already chosen their conclusion. No amount of words can persuade someone who is listening only to confirm what they already believe. This is why the Stoics valued clarity over persuasion. Speak the truth, speak it calmly, then let it go. Your peace is too valuable to spend trying to control another person's judgment. Think about the strongest people you have ever met. Did they constantly defend themselves, or did they simply continue living according to their values? Confidence rarely argues. It simply continues, like a river that never stops flowing because someone questions its direction. There is another reason over-explaining quietly destroys respect. It shifts the balance of power. Without realizing it, you begin asking for permission. Permission to make your own choices. Permission to live your own life. Permission to be yourself. And the moment you ask someone to approve your identity, you slowly surrender ownership of it. Epictetus once taught that we should concern ourselves only with what belongs to us, our thoughts, our actions, our character, never the opinions of others, because opinions are like the weather, changing without warning. And if your peace depends on the weather, you will never know a calm day. Perhaps this is why some conversations leave us feeling so exhausted, not because they were difficult, but because we entered them, trying to win a battle that never belonged to us. Sometimes, the wisest sentence is the shortest. I understand. And then, silence. Not silence, born from fear. Silence, born from certainty. Ask yourself, how much energy have you spent trying to convince people who had already decided not to understand you? Now imagine what your life would look like if you invested that same energy into becoming the person you wanted to be. Perhaps that is where real freedom begins. Reflection. There is a quiet confidence that appears when you stop trying to explain yourself. People notice it, not because you speak more loudly, but because your words become fewer and somehow more meaningful. But there is one mistake, even more dangerous than seeking approval or explaining yourself, a mistake that can destroy years of trust in a single moment. It happens when emotion takes control before wisdom has a chance to speak. And Marcus Aurelius believed that mastering this was the true beginning of inner freedom. There is a reason storms make so much noise. They have no choice. They cannot control their own nature. They simply react again and again, without thinking, without choosing, without pause. Many people live exactly the same way. A single insult changes their mood. One careless comment ruins their entire day. One message, left unanswered, fills their mind with stories that never happened. Someone else moves, and they immediately follow, not with their body, but with their emotions. Marcus Aurelius observed that the greatest prison has no walls. It exists inside the mind of the person who believes every event deserves an emotional response. Think about that. How many times has someone controlled your peace without ever touching you? Not through force, not through power, only through your reaction. Imagine a man standing beside a quiet lake. Another person throws a stone into the water. The lake doesn't choose the ripple. It simply responds. But you are not a lake. You have something the water does not. Choice between what happens and what you do next. There is a space, small, almost invisible, but inside that space, your freedom lives. Most people believe strength means knowing what to say. The Stoics believed strength begins with knowing when not to speak, because words spoken in anger are rarely remembered for their wisdom, only for their damage. Seneca warned that anger is a brief madness, not because it makes us loud, but because it convinces us that losing control is justified. Think back to your last argument. How much of it was really about the problem, and how much was simply two wounded egos trying to win? Victory without peace is still a loss. There is something deeply unsettling about a calm person, not because they are cold, but because they cannot be pulled into someone else's chaos. They listen, they breathe, they choose, and in that moment, the person trying to provoke them realizes they have lost their greatest weapon. reaction. Perhaps this is why the strongest people often appear the quietest. They are not silent because they have nothing to say. They are silent because they understand that not every invitation deserves their presence. Not every insult deserves their attention. Not every battle deserves their energy. Ask yourself, how many hours have you given away to people who never deserved a single minute of your peace? How many nights have you replayed one conversation while the other person slept peacefully? The truth is difficult. They may have forgotten the moment that still controls you, but your mind hasn't. Marcus Aurelius didn't ask how to silence his enemies. He asked how to silence the part of himself that wanted to fight every unnecessary battle. That is where mastery begins, not over others, over yourself. The next time someone tries to provoke you, don't ask, how can I win? Ask, what would I lose if I reacted? Sometimes the greatest victory looks like walking away, not because you are weak, but because your peace is worth more than proving a stranger wrong. But even a calm mind can slowly lose respect if it lacks one essential thing, a boundary. Without boundaries, kindness becomes permission, generosity becomes expectation, and eventually, people stop seeing your compassion as a gift. They begin seeing it as something they are entitled to. There is a quiet misunderstanding that has existed for centuries. Many people believe that being kind means saying yes, yes, to every request, yes, to every interruption, yes, to every sacrifice, because somewhere along the way, they were taught that good people always give. But life has a strange way of revealing the truth. The more available you become, the less valuable your presence seems, not because people are cruel, but because the human mind quickly adapts to whatever is always available. Imagine walking past a beautiful fountain every single day. At first, you stop, you admire it, you appreciate its beauty. Weeks later, you barely notice it's there, not because the fountain changed, but because your mind became accustomed to its presence. Respect works in much the same way. There are people who will gladly accept everything you give, your time, your patience, your energy, your forgiveness, until one day they begin expecting it. What was once a gift slowly becomes an obligation. This is how many people lose themselves, not through hatred, not through violence, but through constant accommodation. Little by little, they become everything everyone else needs, and nothing they themselves need. Marcus Aurelius never taught that virtue meant pleasing everyone. He taught that virtue meant acting according to reason. Sometimes reason says, help. Sometimes reason says, walk away. Wisdom is knowing the difference. A tree doesn't apologize for having roots. Those roots do not make it selfish. They make it possible to survive the storm. Your boundaries are your roots. Without them, Every opinion becomes your direction. Every request becomes your responsibility. Every disappointment becomes your burden. Eventually, you stop living your own life. You begin living everyone else's. There is something remarkable about people who know how to say no. They rarely raise their voices. They rarely become defensive. They simply understand that protecting their peace is not selfish. It is necessary. Think about the people who have earned your deepest respect. Were they available every minute of every day, or did they value their time, their attention, and their principles? Scarcity creates appreciation, not manipulation. Clarity. When people know that your time cannot be taken, they begin treating it with greater care. Perhaps this is why Epictetus reminded his students that freedom belongs only to those who are not enslaved by the expectations of others. Every unnecessary yes becomes another chain, invisible, comfortable, easy to ignore, until one day you realize you've forgotten what freedom felt like. Ask yourself, when was the last time you protected your own peace without feeling guilty? When was the last time you chose yourself without needing someone else's permission? Because every boundary you refuse to build becomes a door through which someone else will eventually walk. Respect doesn't disappear because you are kind. It disappears when kindness has no direction, no limits, no wisdom. The Stoics understood that compassion without discernment becomes self-destruction. But even strong boundaries cannot protect someone who keeps searching for one thing that can never satisfy: approval, praise, recognition. The next truth is perhaps the most dangerous addiction of our time, and most people don't even know they suffer from it. There is a question almost nobody asks themselves, not because it is difficult, but because the answer can be deeply uncomfortable. If no one ever praised you again, would you still be the same person? Would you still work as hard, keep your promises, live according to your values? Or would something inside you begin to disappear? From the moment we are children, we learn to seek approval, a smile from our parents, a good grade from a teacher, recognition from friends. Later, it becomes promotions, followers, compliments, status. The faces change. The habit doesn't. Validation rarely arrives. Wearing the mask of danger, it feels like encouragement, like motivation, like success. But hidden beneath it is a quiet dependency, because every time your worth depends on someone else's applause, your peace belongs to someone else. Imagine lighting a candle inside a dark room. The flame burns quietly. It asks nothing from the outside world. Now imagine another candle that can only burn when someone else holds a match beside it. Which flame is stronger? Which one will survive when everyone leaves? The Stoics believed that the strongest light is the one that burns from within. Marcus Aurelius spent his life surrounded by praise, Soldiers admired him. Citizens respected him. History remembered him. Yet in his private writings, he constantly reminded himself that none of those things defined his character, because admiration can disappear as quickly as it appears. Character cannot. Think about how many decisions people make simply to be noticed. They speak louder than necessary. They buy things they don't need. They pretend to enjoy conversations that leave them empty, not because those choices bring peace, but because, for a brief moment, they feel seen. The strange irony is this: people rarely respect those who desperately seek attention. They respect those who remain the same person, whether anyone is watching or not. Real confidence doesn't perform. It doesn't advertise itself. It doesn't ask to be admired. It simply exists. Perhaps this is why the happiest people are often the least concerned with proving their happiness. They understand that a peaceful life doesn't need an audience. Ask yourself, when was the last time you did something beautiful that nobody will ever know about? A quiet act of kindness, a promise kept to yourself, a difficult decision made simply because it was right. Those moments are invisible, but they are also the moments that build your character. There is an ancient truth hidden beneath all of this. The world can celebrate your image. Only you must live with your soul, and sooner or later, those two things always meet. The person who constantly needs to be seen will eventually forget how to see themselves, but the person who learns to stand quietly without applause discovers a freedom that cannot be taken away. There is one final truth, the deepest one, the one Marcus Aurelius returned to again and again, because every lesson we've explored leads here, not to the opinions of other people, but to the relationship you have with yourself. There is a question Marcus Aurelius never stopped asking himself. Not, how do I make people admire me? Not, how do I become more important? But something far more difficult. Who am I when nobody is watching? Because sooner or later, every title disappears, every compliment is forgotten, every audience goes home, and all that remains is the person you have become. Most people spend years building an image. Very few spend time building a character. An image can be created in a single afternoon. A character takes years. It is built every time you choose discipline over comfort, integrity over convenience, silence over unnecessary arguments, truth over popularity. Imagine an old lighthouse standing alone on a cliff, storm after storm, wave after wave, year after year. It never chases the ships. It never begs to be noticed. It simply stands because its purpose is not to attract attention. Its purpose is to remain a light. Character works the same way. You do not become respected by demanding that others see your value. You become respected by becoming someone whose values do not change. every time the weather does. Marcus Aurelius understood something that our world constantly forgets. The quality of your life is shaped by the quality of your thoughts, not by the number of people who approve of you, not by your followers, not by your reputation, because reputation lives inside other people's minds. Character lives inside yours, and only one of those goes with you everywhere. There will always be someone who misunderstands you, someone who dislikes you, someone who underestimates you, someone who walks away. Let them. Not because they are unimportant, but because your peace cannot depend on someone else's decision to stay. One of the greatest mistakes we make is believing that every relationship must be saved. The Stoics never believed that. Some people enter your life to teach you who you should never become. Others leave your life to teach you who you have become. Both are gifts, even if they don't feel like it at first. Perhaps the deepest form of confidence has nothing to do with speaking or winning or proving. Perhaps it is simply the ability to leave without bitterness, to forgive without forgetting, to continue without resentment, to grow without applause. There comes a day when you stop asking, "Why don't they respect me?" and begin asking, "Have I respected myself today?" That is the day your life begins to change, because self-respect is not an emotion. It is a practice, a quiet decision, repeated every single day. Everything we've explored today leads to one truth. People will always have opinions. Some will admire you. Some will criticize you. Some will misunderstand you without ever trying to know you. You cannot control any of it. But there is one thing that has always belonged to you: your character. Protect it, even when it costs you approval, especially when it costs you approval, because the world can take your money, your status, your reputation, but it cannot take the person you refuse to stop becoming. Maybe when this video began, you believed the problem was the people who disrespected you, but perhaps that was never the real story. Perhaps respect doesn't disappear the moment someone insults you. Perhaps it begins disappearing the first time you betray your own values, the first time you remain silent when your conscience asks you to speak, the first time you say yes when your soul is begging to say no, the first time you choose acceptance instead of authenticity. Those moments feel small, almost invisible, yet together they shape the person you become. Marcus Aurelius never promised an easy life. He promised something greater. That peace belongs to the person who governs their own mind, and maybe that is the only respect worth chasing. Years from now, people may forget the arguments you won, the opinions you defended, the applause you received, but they will remember something else: the calmness you carried, the integrity you refused to compromise, the quiet strength that never needed to announce itself, because history rarely remembers those who tried to please everyone. It remembers those who mastered themselves. Protect your peace, guard your character, and wherever life takes you next, let wisdom be louder than your fear.